Hey guys and gals, welcome to Chapter 2, Intercultural Communication as a Process. This chapter starts on page 33 in your ebook and continues through. So just to kind of give you a summary of what to expect in the chapter, reasons to study communication, so again, making my job relevant here and making the course more relevant to you. Characteristics of communication, elements of interpersonal, relational ethics, perception, which is huge, so we will spend a bit of time talking about that, and social identity as well as cultural skills, which is also very interesting. I personally love this chapter and I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do. So I'll give you a little bit of a summary of the chapter that you can listen to this lecture and use this as you read through or as you study. So first of all, the 6 main reasons to study communication. Many people will think that communication is simply like public speaking and that's it, and while that is a huge part of communication, more likely the courses that are linked to it are like this one: intercultural, interpersonal, mass communication, organizational communication, etc. So it's in every facet of your life. So here's kind of a list of where you'll see this and why this class is important to you, or should be, hopefully. Communication is the basis of your identity. You are who you are because of communication. It's the foundation of the self-concept. We'll talk a bit about this. Communication has a relationship impact, so that's interpersonal communication. We develop and maintain relationships through communication. It has a professional impact. There's no career that doesn't involve some ability to communicate, even if you are working in a solitary environment. One of the main skills employers are looking for is the ability to communicate. Communication has a cultural impact. People in the world are dependent upon each other, so we're a global society now. We need to know how to communicate with other cultures. The past and present challenges of the future are the expansion of world trade and international business. An added importance of intercultural study and practice are technology, travel, competition for resources, international conflict, security, environmental challenges, world health issues, etc., etc. Communication education improves and educational enterprise by enhancing classroom instruction. So you're an interesting group here in that you are in a virtual course on communication. Some people think this doesn't work efficiently, but it really does. You're using technology to your benefit. You're using critical thinking at a very personal level. So even though you don't have that face-to-face interaction that is a big part of communication, you're still utilizing different forms of communication to learn and to express what you know, and to even work in groups. Characteristics of communication. So you will recognize these, they'll pop up again and again. First, it is symbolic. In human communication, a symbol is an expression that stands for or represents something else. Symbols bear no inherent relation to what they are intended to represent, so they're arbitrary. The main reason communication is symbolic is the assignment of meaning. Words by themselves mean nothing. The way we speak them, how we understand them, and how we express or associate meanings to words is what makes them have meaning. So we rely on symbols. The problem here is that we don't always interpret symbols the same way. So saying I love you versus I love you, or love ya, or oh yeah, love you too, or even just saying thank you after someone says I love you. The meaning behind that is all going to be different. The expression, the tonality is different. The way you position yourself is different. So the symbol, the word love, by itself means nothing. What you associate with love, or that feeling of love, that's where the meaning sits. Communication is interpretive. So people interpret symbolic behaviors of others. When someone asks you, hey, are you okay? Is something going on? Something wrong? They've read non-verbally or even verbally something that seems off about your behavior or your verbal tone, your vocal variety. Maybe something, if they are pretty close to you, something in your communication pattern is saying something's not right. I'm not feeling well, I'm not happy, something's different. So if someone's asking you, hey, are you okay? It's because they read something that might be going on. So even if nothing's really wrong and you're not upset, maybe you're being more introspective, or maybe you're worried about something that's not related to the person, just being as direct as you care to be, or as open as you care to be, and offering a response aside from, oh yeah, I'm fine, is going to be helpful. So just saying I'm fine a lot of times means that you're not fine. Communication is transactional. It involves not only the physical act of communicating, but the psychological act that you are forming impressions in your mind of people that you're communicating with. You're forming judgments about the person, and these can be positive or negative, or both, about the individuals that you're communicating with. So there are 3 principles involved with communicating as a transaction. People engaged in communication are sending messages continuously and simultaneously. Communication events have a past, a present, and a future. And finally, participants in communication play different roles. Communication is contextual. Context is a setting in which communication encounters occur, including what precedes and follows what is said. So context is different in almost every situation and every communication event, or discussion, or conversation, however you want to identify that. Communication involves shared meanings. So meanings include the thoughts in one person's mind as well as interpretations you make of another messages. Communication involves shared meanings that are invented and co-created between and among participants. So meaning is an active process that's created by cooperation between you and the person you're communicating with. Meanings are in people. One does not receive meaning, but rather you construct meanings. Go back to the concept of love. This one's a great one, or hate, whatever you want to, but I'm going to be all lovey-gushy, so I'm going to use love as an example. If my mother or father says, I love you, versus my boyfriend saying, I love you, versus my best friend saying, love you girl, or a stranger on the street just saying, I love you, as interesting as that would be. The meanings are different because of the individuals that are saying it. So the type of love that my parents and I share is definitely not the same type of love that my boyfriend and I would share, or your spouse and you would share, versus the love of a friendship. It's not going to be the same as the romantic relationship, which is not going to be the same as the familial relationship, if you see what I'm saying. And then a stranger expressing that they love me is interesting. It could have many different meanings. One does not know the full story. So there are shared meanings, and it is based in the person. Okay, so elements of intercultural communication. There's action, interaction, and transaction models. We tend to think in transaction-based models, so that's going to be the more common, and you're going to hear that a lot more. But you do need to understand kind of where this starts off. Communication as an action model really makes us think about communication as a one-way process. You send a message, somebody receives the message. Immediately you can see where there's an issue with this. Communication is cyclical. It doesn't just go one way. One thing that communication as action introduces us to, which we use in interaction and transaction, is the concept of noise. So there are different types of noise, and you're going to hear these again. Haha. There's physical noise, psychological noise, and physiological noise. So, physical noise. I just tapped on my desk. That's physical noise. Anything that's in the background of wherever you're listening to this, if there's anything, that's a noise. That's a physical distraction. If you have psychological noise, this could be stress. This could be you thinking about other responsibilities that you have going on. Maybe you were having a fight with your spouse or your partner right before going to class, and then you're trying to focus on what the class lecture is about, but your mind keeps going back to that argument, or something that you forgot, or something that you still need to do. Physiological noise could actually be an impairment that you can't hear, and that creates noise from you understanding what the message is. It could be that you are physically ill, that you are having a hard time focusing because you don't feel good. Communication as interaction. This is characterized by sender to receiver and has feedback from the receiver. So this is when we start to see this become a cycle of communication. It has all the same elements that communication is action. It still has a sender, a message, the context, and the receiver, and noise. But then it continues with feedback. Communication is transaction. This model does not distinguish between the roles of source and receiver because you are always going to be a sender and a receiver of communication constantly. This really does reflect how complex communication is, and it makes us really consider what the messages are and what the context is of the messages. So each of these models are important to know and understand, but some are going to be more useful than others, and in general, how we study communication is as a transaction. This deals with the issue of lying and deceit, very unsavory stuff. Lying is pretty common. Unfortunately, there is a study that found that 60% of college students lied at least once during a 10-minute conversation, and on average 3 lies were told during this short conversation. Now, when I say lying, in this context, the study means certain white lies or fibs, might be something you refer to it as. There are different types of lies. There are the white lies, the bold-faced lies, and the lies of omission. So white lies are considered small and inconsequential lies that are usually for the sake of saving the other person's feelings. Whereas bold-faced lies are the intention of deceit, and lies of omission are just not saying anything when perhaps communication should be expressed. Deceit is really common online because of the anonymity that we have. So online dating, you have to be very mindful that people show their best self, or they try to show their best self, or their best image of themselves. And like resume padding, they may do the same thing with an online profile. So you really have to become a detective and kind of dig through and see what you see as being realistic and what you see as not being realistic. And it's hard to know many times. Complete honesty sounds really good in the abstract. However, total honesty has potential to destroy relationships. So many people will recognize that lying, like white lying, in certain circumstances is completely justifiable. This is by Knapp in 2006. It would be a disaster, quotes Bella DiPaolo, if people tried to tell the truth all the time. If you tell the whole truth, you start alienating people. You have to go back and apologize because you've made a mess of your interpersonal relationships. Complete and total honesty is asking for relational disaster. This does not mean that we should go around lying to everyone. This is actually to give you a personal example. I tend to do that in this class. I hope you don't mind. My boyfriend Joe is a brutally honest individual. Brutally honest. He believes in complete and total honesty, which is great and terrible. It's great because I know I'm not going to catch him in a lie, or it would be super duper rare. It's terrible because sometimes he's a little bit blunt with his opinion on something. So I make sure never to ask if I look fat in something or if I don't look good, because many times I know the answer. I'm not always looking real great, and you kind of fish for compliments. You want the person to feed you something. And he really is really honest. So it might be in my best interest to avoid saying, does this shirt make me look fat? Because he might be like, yeah, babe. That could be problematic. That might hurt my feelings a little bit. Moving on. The perception process. Perception is the means by which we make sense of the physical and social world around us. There is no reality except the one contained within us. This is absolutely true. Each of you perceive the world in a unique way. We may share certain perceptions, but we won't share everything. The way you see the world, whoever's listening to this, is not going to be the same way that I see the world. Is not going to be the same way your fellow classmates see the world. Even your closest relationship, your spouse, your family, your best friend. You're all going to have different perceptions of different things. We like to filter things through our own personal lens. That's how we organize information about our environment, and that's how we proceed through making relationships, how we think about things, how we judge different things. So we observe all the available data in our environment. We choose what data we want to focus on. So hear, smell, feel, taste, process, see. Define the person or event and build expectations of future behavior. And our expectations help us determine our behavior towards that person, and our behavior affects the other person's perceptions. So, have you ever heard of first impressions being the most important? I'm assuming you're all nodding your heads right now. Making a good first impression is very important, and it's something that can be overlooked, unfortunately. It is very, very difficult to make up for a poor first impression. And that's not to say that, we're always on, that we always have to be in a great mood, because you don't. You can feel whatever emotion you're feeling, and that's fine. Just be mindful that in certain circumstances, socially or in the business world, your first impression with that other person or persons is going to be vital in how they perceive you, who they think you are, what they think you stand for, how they think you feel about them or about society, life, social circumstances, whatever the situation, the context of that conversation may be. Their perception is being formed on you, and vice versa. So just be mindful. This is how we perceive. We select, we organize, and we process. Attribution processes lead to attribution errors. Attribution errors are problematic because of a few different things. Self-serving bias, tendency to single out one or two characteristics of a person and then attribute everything that person does to these characteristics. So when somebody does something wrong or inappropriate, we think they have a character flaw rather than attribute that person's behavior to certain circumstances that they may have had no control over whatsoever. People driving in the car. This tends to be where I have the biggest attribution error of others. Yes, this happens to me. I teach this stuff. That doesn't mean I'm not going to fall prey to it. So I will attribute being bad or poor behavior or poor choices to your driving habits. So case in point, if I'm driving on the interstate, and let's say I'm on the Beltway, because why not? I'm on 495 and somebody cuts me off in traffic to the point that I have to slam on my brakes and I'm worried about getting rear-ended. I'm going to be pretty mad at the person in front of me that cut me off and almost put me in an accident. So immediately, because of their poor driving etiquette, I will think that they are a bad person. And that's wrong. That's, it's hard not to feel that way, but it's inaccurate. They may be a bad person. I don't know. They may be extremely unethical and just a bad individual. But I don't know that. They might just be a poor driver. Or maybe they didn't see me for whatever reason because they weren't paying attention to what they were doing. Whatever it is, that is an attribution error. Gender identity is demonstrated by communication style. So women's communication style is usually considered supportive, egalitarian, personal, and disclosive, so more open, whereas men's are characterized by more competition and assertiveness. So Julia Wood, who is an author of another textbook that we use in communication courses at Nova, has identified feminine and masculine themes in U.S. society. Feminine themes: appearance still counts, you should be sensitive and caring, accept negative treatment by others, and essentially be a superwoman. Masculinity themes are: don't be female, be successful, be aggressive, be sexual and self-reliant. Masculine themes are often considered the opposite of what it means to be a woman or a gay man. According to Wood, American men are socialized first and foremost thinking that being a man is about being not a woman. Gender identity is different from biological sex or sexual identity. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing if you've never studied gender studies. Your gender, being masculine or feminine, does not necessarily mean that is your sex, being male or female, or both if you're hermaphrodite. Age identity. As we age, we play into cultural notions of how individuals our age should act, look, behave. that, in a sense, is an age identity. So our notions of age change as we grow older. We have different philosophies, values, ways of speaking to others, and not all people in any generation are all alike, but you can see a lot of different overlap in these age identities of different generations. Time period in which you're born and raised has a very strong influence on you later on. People of the same generation tend to form a cultural cohort group that share personal values, beliefs, and behaviors. Age-related stereotypes make it really difficult for younger individuals to engage in mutually satisfying relationships with older individuals. And this will happen again as you get older. Older people have certain strategies that help them avoid age-related negative stereotypes. And there are advantages with forming friendships with older individuals. They can give you great career and personal advice and give you a different perspective than what you would commonly see in a peer. If conversations are handled appropriately, younger and older communicators can benefit greatly from friendships and relationships here. Racial identity. It is popularly believed that differences between people were biological or racial. So, race is a social construct. This comes from categorizing people into different groups. Race has been used by academics, by the government, by political agencies to identify people as insiders or outsiders. Today, racial identity is associated with external physical traits such as skin color, hair texture, facial appearance, and your eye shape. Racial identity is a largely modern notion. Ethnic identity. Your ethnicity is derived from a sense of shared heritage, history, traditions, values, behaviors, area of origin, and in some instances, a shared language. In contrast to racial identity, ethnic identity may be seen as a set of ideas versus the physical characteristic that we relate to race. Language, or considered mother tongue, is an obvious influence of ethnicity in communication. Regional identity. With the exception of very small nations, every country can be divided into a number of geographical regions, including the United States. These regions have different cultural contrasts, so that could be ethnicity, language, accent, dialect, food, customs, dress, or different historical and political legacies. So in certain parts of the United States, if you are trying to order a carbonated beverage, you may ask for a soda. You might ask for a Coke, even if you want like a Pepsi or a Dr. Pepper or something else. Or you may ask for pop. It's all the same thing. It's still what I would call soda because that's where I'm from regionally. It's all carbonated beverage, but it has different names. And organizational identity. This is really important, especially in collectivist cultures. This practice is not as prevalent now among younger individuals, but this is still a practice in the United States. On business cards, for example, Japanese business person's company and their position are placed above his or her name. On another example, U.S. business cards, the company name is usually at the top, followed by the individual's name in large bold letters, and then the company position in a smaller type. That is representative of something. Personal identity. This all links into your self-concept. Identity negotiation is a similar idea. This is a liberation process. Negotiating identities is a process involving you and another person, in which case you exchange codes of personhood and worldview, so your own identity. You exchange them. You understand the other person's. The problem here is that conflict does arise from having different identities and talking about different identities. Lastly, are culture skills. So certain assumptions are listed there. There are 10 of them by Ting Toomey. This is on page 61. And it's important to understand how closely culture, communication, and identity are intertwined. This is very much an interconnected system. So be mindful of that communication, culture, and identity are very much linked. The end of chapter 2 lists the key terms and a summary of the course. Please use these as you prepare for your quizzes and for your exams in the class. Highlight or bookmark this page. It'll make life a little bit easier as you refer back to it for future work. And if you have any questions, of course, please post them to the discussion board. And that is Chapter 2.